Well, hi again. I'm in a hotel room now in Manhattan, of all places. It's a long story of why on earth am I in Manhattan. But I was going to try to keep everything kind of chronological. I was going to try to pick up kind of where I left off. And I know I talked a little bit about the surgery. I was going to talk a little bit more. Once again, they got 80 to 90% of the tumor out, which is extremely good. Once again, they can never do 100%. So 90% sounds really good. Um, how they did the surgery is they did a cut. And I'm not wearing a beanie because it makes my head feel better, but I can show y'all sometime. But more or less cut from here, right around my hairline, all the way back to almost my other temple. And they kept the cut behind the hairline, which is good. It's kind of not that big of a deal, but kind of handy, neat. It'll be hidden once my hair grows in a little bit more. But more or less, they peeled my face down a little bit here, and they went in through the left part of my skull here. And as they removed this section, they also went in through my sinus cavity, which kind of complicated matters. It allowed them to get to where or allowed him to get to where he needed to go. But going in through the sinus cavity required them to seal it off. And when they were done from my nasal cavity, so right now you got sinuses all over your face here, here, in your nose, or a nasal cavity here. But they wound up having to seal off my sinus cavity from my nasal cavity with some sort of skin that they got from who knows where. But the complication of that is after surgery, as well, you can sneeze but don't hold it in. You can cough but don't cough too hard. Don't suck on straws. Don't blow your nose. And just because that dam can come free and it'll start leaking CSF is what they call it, the cerebral spinal fluid. And you start just leaking it more or less just down your face. He said, just beware of anything that's salty. Let us know. And they don't make it sound like a big deal. They say, well, if it happens, we'll just go back in and close back up. No big deal. No harm, no foul. The biggest thing, as I said, is that it is a possible infection point. But I'm out of that area. It's past 6 weeks from the surgery, so that the whole damn area is supposed to be healed up pretty good by now. So luckily, no salty fluid coming out my face. Uh, found out the surgeon did not mention in his post-operative notes that he went in through my nasal cavity, or sinus cavity. Sorry, I keep getting those confused. So he also told me to expect to be coughing up a weird bloody mucus thing, which would have been upsetting, but he did warn me about it, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But once I'm doing this, the mid-level nurse, who's a mid-level nurse, is kind of a super nurse. They're tons of respect for them. They're well knowledgeable, and they're able to prescribe medicine. There's a big difference between them and like an RN. But the mid-level nurse is kind of like the boss of the ICU. That night had no idea that he went in through my sinus cavities. She was assuming that it was from the oxygen they put in my throat from when I was in surgery. And I had to explain to her what happened to me, and she was real apologetic about that, which you can't have nothing but respect for that. Also, drug they have me on in there is called Decadron. It's also another name for it is dexamethasone, I believe. It's a steroid that's anti-inflammatory, and it's extremely good at what it does. Before I was in surgery, when they sent me home, that drug stopped my headaches and actually shrinks tumors. And I think it's also an anti-inflammatory in general. But I got rid of my headaches, and while you're in there, they keep giving it to you. Right when you're out of surgery, they keep giving it to you because they want all the swelling to come down. And even when they discharge me, they still put it on me. But it's not something you can just stop. They have to wean you off of it because I believe your body stops making something, and they have to slowly bring that down in order for your body to start more or less making I can't remember what it's called, but it has to start making something, some sort of hormone. But so the advantage of it is it shrinks tumors, which is way good. The disadvantage of it is the side effects, and they're not really side effects because I think just about everybody gets them. Is you can't sleep. It's like the sleep you get is always like skimming kind of sleep. You never can get a deep sleep. It makes the room feel like you're on a ship. It's always swaying. Makes you irritable, makes you anxious, and probably the worst one is it can make you hallucinate, and which is you're going through all this and then you just won't throw hallucinating on top of it, which is scary to say the least. And it's not like you're seeing Elvis out there, but I was definitely had a hallucinating experience. Probably talk about that a little bit more because it kind of had a second one also, which I remember a little bit better, but it kind of goes on to a different story then. So I'll mention that later, but definitely scary whenever you're going through all this and you wake up hallucinating. So talking about I got nothing but respect for nurses, and they got a tough job. But I just had a whole bunch of, looking back, kind of funny incidences. One was of my ICU nurses. I was a night nurse, and one of the things I picked up on all this is just beware of night. And you think they'd put the best people at night, but you just get the feeling that's not true. Like the MRI that I had at night that didn't click well. It's kind of felt similar with the nurses as well, but my night nurse was actually from Texas. I'm up in Hartford, Connecticut. My nurse is from Stanford, Texas, which was really neat. We're just kind of talking about it, but which was neat, having a little bit of something to relate with. But I have a catheter in my arm, and what that does is it continually monitors your blood pressure, which is really neat. It is real time. It's no pump. It's a real time monitoring your blood pressure. But my blood pressure started going up. I'm sure it's because I was anxious. So he gave me a blood pressure lowering medicine, shot in the arm, and the instant he did that, it felt like my chest just blew up. And I'm of course letting him know that I think I'm having a heart attack. What on earth did you do to me? And he's on top of me, and he's looking at the monitor that above me that I can't see. And it's an EKG that they have constantly hooked up to me, which is also really cool. And he says, "Well, you're definitely not having a heart attack. Not sure what's happening, but I got a theory." And just imagine that you're sitting there with this heart attack feeling, chest ripping open, and you have somebody with the most hick voice, and felt like home, but it was the biggest hick voice in the world. He's saying, "I got a theory." At that point, you're saying, "Get the mid-level, get a doctor, get something." But they wound up just giving me different blood pressure lowering medicine, and it wound up calming me down, and I wound up in halfway decent sleep that night. So have no idea what that was, no idea what happened, but not a heart attack, which is definitely good. Another thing, I kind of started doing the same nurse, and this is my fault here. I started self-medicating myself. I did not like the side effects of the steroid at all. So, just in my logic, my thinking, I started thinking, well, let's drink water. Let's get this out of your system. So I just drank tons and tons and tons of water. I was like going to the restroom like 5 times an hour. So they started actually analyzing my urine, also from blood samples. They noticed that my electrolytes just completely collapsed or were too low, whatever it was. So they restricted my liquid intake to a single Gatorade, little bitty bottle this big. It's like the 24-ounce one a day. And they started giving me salt tablets. So I learned my lesson there. Don't self-medicate while you're in the hospital. But by extension, like, who would have thought they're still giving out salt tablets today? And these things aren't gel capped. This came into an effect with a day nurse, a new nurse, another one that was kind of iffy. Definitely a bad look with nurses in there. But this one was part of my fault. The salt tablets, they're not gel capped or gel encapsulated or anything. They're just regular old salt. You put it in your mouth and it tastes like concentrated salt. So they're kind of hard to swallow. But this one time I was half asleep. I was laying back, and he hands me the pill in the little bitty cup. So I just pop it in my mouth, take a drink, and it like falls halfway down into my throat, and I start choking on it. And I instantly get on my hands and knees and start coughing. But in my head, I'm sitting there trying to do this balance. I need air. The air is good for life, but I don't want to cough too hard. I don't want to start having CSF leak down my face and have to go back into surgery. So this is like a minute I'm going through this coughing fit, and eventually I do cough it up, which is also good. But the whole time that nurse is now if you're coughing, you're not supposed to do anything, and I understand that. But he was like looking at my father, who was in the room, like expecting him to do something, which did not give you much confidence. But luckily it came up, and everything was just fine. And they never gave me another salt tablet after that, which is good. It might have been because of that. During this, it's probably a day or two after surgery. I'm not exactly sure when. I believe I was still in the ICU. talked to the neurosurgeon who did the surgery. This is when he's talking about the finally let me know 80–90%. Still not telling me what it is. He says he can guess, and what his guess is, not great, not bad, somewhere in the middle, and that I have to wait 2 weeks on the pathology. But really, that meeting and everything's happening to me, and then it's really when it's finally sinking into me that you have cancer. And it was definitely a breaking down point right then, and but definitely sunk in to an extent. Of course, after we got the pathology report, we learned more, but then is when we definitely, myself, my family, my wife, we definitely finally sunk in. So, but anywho, that just about concludes the hospital stay. And there's not much more to where I am now. Mostly talking to neuro-oncologists, which are brain cancer doctors, and talked to one and got a different opinion. Wound up coming up to Sloan, which is why I'm in Manhattan now. But I'll talk more about the neuro-oncologist and pathology reports and second opinions. And I'm actually in a trial right now as a first-line treatment, which is real scary. But I'll mention that all next time. I'll talk to y'all later.